Hey guys, came down to the wire, but I'm still posting a video every day in February. Another 30 minutes and I would have missed it. Um, how y'all doing? So, before everybody gets in here, I guess I'll just talk about one of the funnier things I've found out today. Um, it has to do with a certain animal hospital having a ward named in it after John Oliver because Russell Crowe paid to have that ward named in his honor, and it's the John Oliver Koala Chlamydia Ward because apparently there are populations of koalas in the wild who all have chlamydia, and I was unaware of this, like 100% infection rates of chlamydia. And on top of that, I learned about koala pap, which apparently pap is poop, but it's nutritious poop. And so when a koala is going to feed its baby koala, it poops pap, and then the pap is what's carrying the chlamydia in it and infecting the babies, and that's what continues the 100% chlamydia infection rates in some of the koala populations, which it's kind of disturbing to me because I think koalas are kind of cute, and I might have wanted to hold one if I went to a petting zoo, but now I'm like, not worth getting chlamydia. So that was fun to learn. Hi, Bugsy. How you doing? Long time no see. Um, nice of you to show up. You're the first person here. Um, so, Bernie Sanders just won New Hampshire, which is big because if you're looking at the recent history of the Democratic primary race, basically, if you didn't win in either Iowa or New Hampshire, you pretty much don't have a chance. So um, conventional wisdom says that pattern is going to keep going on, and so we're down to basically Pete Buttigieg or Bernie Sanders, which does not include people like Joe Biden or Michael Bloomberg, right? So Bloomberg apparently, like, nationally has like 15% now because of his ads, right? And he had two ads that I saw during the Super Bowl, and just uh, one ad was in the Super Bowl from Donald Trump, which to me says that both of them are rich and can afford some Super Bowl ad time, which I don't know that that's the best way to spend your money if you're trying to win an election, but you know, it really was a show of money. And I think Donald Trump got the better of it because, his uh, ad, I remember it for having a black woman freed from drug possession charges from a prison. And she was, on film saying, "Thank you, Donald Trump," you know, and I have no idea what those Bloomberg ads were that I saw. That they've just like left my memory. What were they about? They were about Bloomberg has money, right? So, um, yeah, Bernie winning New Hampshire, I think maybe another, one or two of the candidates that are polling in the 1% might drop out and endorse him, and maybe give him a little bit more steam. Um, Maybe make a cut a backroom deal where they can be part of an administration in the future. You know, maybe. But unfortunately, the progressive vote has been uh, split a bit between Bernie and Warren, and they have their little tiff going on right now about whether or not a woman is electable, and whether or not Bernie even said anything about that. So, yeah, that sucks. But Bernie did edge out Pete Buttigieg and won, I think it was like 26% of the vote in New Hampshire versus Buttigieg's 24. So that's still not a majority of the state either way, you know. So still kind of wide open, but conventional wisdom says it's either the winner of the Iowa or New Hampshire uh, state that's going to get the eventual nomination. And I almost said primary for both, but Iowa doesn't have a primary as a caucus. So, and on March 3rd, we're going to have Super Tuesday, and Colorado doesn't have a caucus anymore either. We have a caucus for all the other things, but for the presidential race, we have a primary. The caucus is a couple days later. I will be going to my precinct caucus, and I will be once again trying to become a delegate so that I can be part of local politics and share it with you guys here on YouTube. But um, it won't really make as much of a difference as it did in previous years because uh, Colorado's gone back to having a more democratic primary process where it's just the straight up popular vote. Um, they didn't like that in the past, and they changed it back, and they now they flip flopped again the other way, and we'll see how this works. There's still a caucus for everything else, though. Who's talking to me now? Storm Singer says, "Hello, listening before bed. Thanks for broadcasting." Well, thank you for being a part of my sleep study. You know, uh, it's all I can do to help people sleep. Because I'm such a great conversationalist. I put your mind at ease. You know, fuck you, Storm Singer. Um, so I also just like hearing about koala chlamydia because of the fires in Australia, bringing up the koala chlamydia news again. I also heard something else today while I was watching YouTube videos that I thought were not going to raise anyone's anxiety here in my house, but um, unfortunately, in one of them, somebody said something wrong about addiction. And Misty and I both are addiction counselors. Um, and the person who was wrong was Rebecca Watson, who runs the Skeptic website. And, she's kind of famous in the uh, atheist circles and whatnot. She made a video called Jordan Peterson, Addiction and the Cult of Personal Responsibility. And in it, she was talking about Jordan Peterson's uh, addiction to benzodiazepines. And she said that she herself had a prescription for Xanax that she doesn't use because she favors cannabis because it's legal in the state where she's in, okay. But she very flippantly said that cannabis is not addictive. Let me play it for you.
I think I've had one in the past 3 years because I get anxiety thinking of getting addicted to my anti anxiety pills, and also because weed is legal here in California and it's not addictive and it accomplishes much of the same thing.
So, she really laughed off the idea that cannabis could be addictive, right? Um, so here we have DSM-5, something us psychotherapists sometimes reference, right? And pull it on back to the substance and addiction pages right here. And we got right here cannabis use disorder. Now, I know that Rebecca Watson said this flippantly, and it's just like a tiny portion of her video, and much of what she's saying in her video, I agree with. But um, I've been fighting this fight for a while, and when we're talking about the consequences of being addicted to something, that's completely different than addiction to it, right? So, if the severity of withdrawal symptoms is worse for benzodiazepines, then she is then conflating that to mean that benzodiazepines are more addictive, right? Which is not the case, right? Actually, uh, addiction counselor here. Most addictive substance on the planet is barbecue sauce, right? They've actually done studies about this. But severity of withdrawal symptoms from barbecue sauce, not that bad, right? Weed, nowhere near as bad as benzodiazepines, but that does not mean that it is not uh, addictive just because it has relatively minor withdrawal symptoms when compared to other harder drugs, even alcohol, right? And uh, in my chat now, we've got Dragon Slayer Ornstein saying anything can be addictive. Oh, yes, anything. Um, just look at how many different anonymous groups there are, 12-step groups. Um, Sexaholics Anonymous, Gambling Anonymous, Cannabis Anonymous, Marijuana Anonymous. There's, Crystal Meth Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, uh, Alcoholics Anonymous. The list goes on. And Overeaters Anonymous. Uh, Anything can be addictive. And I'm going to add, let's say in the future, I'm going to say that probably video games are going to have their own uh, listing in the DSM 6 or 7, if not just social media and the internet in general. Um, let's see. Ivan Vane Veen says he has a glossy paged hardcover version of the DSM. Awesome. That's awesome. But let's see. I am Godard says weed is hardly addictive compared to benzodiazepines. Not true. Not true. Weed has less severe withdrawal symptoms than benzodiazepines. We're not measuring the addictive nature of the drug when we're looking at the severity of the withdrawal symptoms. And that's what's being conflated here time and again. Like I run into this all the time. Um, I think one of the best ways of putting this is just look at how much dodging the people who are addicted to cannabis do, and how much mental gymnastics they do when you compare their feelings about all the other drugs that they don't use, right? Um, and Rebecca Watson here is a prime example. You know, this is the drug that she likes to use is cannabis. So of course, she's defending that and laughing off the notion that she could be addicted to it, because it's not addictive. And she's giving Jordan Peterson a hard time for his addiction, which deservedly so. I don't like the guy, but um, and just so that you guys know, I came across her video because I watch her regularly. Just getting that out of the way. I am a fan. She just said one thing that I disagree with. It is that one thing that I've decided to talk about in my nightly rambles to you guys, my handful of people that are watching. But normally, I like most of the things that she says. Uh, when she was talking about how Jordan Peterson operates and this particular uh, psychological perspective that he sells, it was actually reminding me of the theme of the last 2 or 3 weeks that I've been having. I keep on hearing about more people being sucked into the Landmark Forum, which is a cult crossed with a multi-level marketing campaign. But part of the Landmark Forum is it's supposed to be this transformative spiritual event where you're locked in a room for like 3 days, and you do get to go home at night for like a couple hours and come back, but they like try to keep you up all night, kind of like Jonestown style brainwashing. They want to get your brain pliable, so they keep you up for, well, very early in the morning till way late at night, and then they try to hit you up for more money. But one of the things they do during that 3 day uh, brainwashing festival is they put people on stage and they victim shame them, right? They say that they are the reasons why everything in their life is not going according to their own plan, right? And in listening to Rebecca Watson talk about Jordan Peterson, he's using much the same uh, style of victim shaming, you know. And I wish that people would expand their notion of like what victim shaming is, so that they would understand the connections between all of these different practices of all these different cults, and even like Scientology, for example. When they're using these brute force methods to brainwash people, it's usually filled with the same junk. Now, okay, I am Godard says that's my point. Benzo withdrawal is far worse. Yes, it can be lethal, right? Alcohol and benzodiazepine withdrawal both can cause seizures and death. I have not once heard of a seizure death related to the withdrawal symptoms of cannabis. Now, here's the thing, I have heard of withdrawal symptoms from cannabis. You know where I heard them from? Right here. They're listed. And here's the thing, um, when this was the DSM 4 TR, right? It started to undergo revisions where people were putting in submissions for, how to revise the DSM 4 into the DSM 5, right? That shit took 20 years of review. by hundreds of scientists who are all named inside of this, right? So when we're talking about uh, traceability back to science, everything in this is traceable to studies and is based on sound scientific research, right? And it's going to get reviewed and updated. And if this revision that goes from DSM-5 to 6 is anything like the revision from 4 to 5, uh, it's already begun, right? And the final revision will come out in another 15 years, you know, after people have had quite an opportunity to chime in on whether or not they see something wrong in the drafts, right? And everyone from the scientific community will be able to voice their opinion on whether or not the proposed drafts for the DSM-6 are appropriate based on the available science. So, yeah, just because you don't uh, use other drugs and you do use that drug doesn't mean that it doesn't have an addiction that can be associated with it, right? Because that's the drug that you like. You know what's listed right before cannabis use disorder? Caffeine, all right, as far as addictive substances. So caffeine's in here, right? As far as withdrawal symptoms, probably on par with weed, right? You can really overdo caffeine. Um, and do not get between me and my coffee cup in the morning, right? But I'm not going to deny that caffeine use disorder is a thing or that caffeine is addictive because I like drinking coffee, right? Uh, Dragon Slayer Ornstein says, "Is sugar in there?" No, not as sugar, but there is a food related addiction disorder in here, and there is also alcohol, which the underlying addiction underneath alcohol would be sugar because alcohol breaks down into sugar in your liver. So there's that too. That's why diabetics have it worse as far as seizure risk when they are withdrawing from alcohol. The more you know. Um, let's see. Dragon Slayer Ornstein says, seems to be he's just presenting his ideas on things to people just like everyone else. Is that me or Jordan Peterson? We'll just let that one marinate for a while. Um, no Kwame River one. You don't get to have a summary of everything I've said so far. So when I open this thing and I read the withdrawal symptoms you can have from cannabis, let's see where are we right here. They follow like this: irritability, anger, aggression, nervousness, anxiety, sleep difficulty, decreased appetite or weight loss, restlessness, depressed mood, and you could have significant discomfort like abdominal pain, shakiness, tremors, sweating, fever, chills, or headache. It's all there under cannabis. So uh, now that we know that there's those symptoms, there is a significant overlap. as far as the type of symptoms that benzodiazepines would give you. It's just that they are so much more powerful in giving them to you that the severity is higher. But Kwame River says he screen capped my fingerprint. Why? Like, where's my camera? Like, like, for what purpose? Here's my thumb. It's my real thumb. Um, oh, Popcorn Power says someone is clickbaiting on the title card. No, maybe I'm picking just the more popular things that I want to talk about. But uh, didn't I put Koala Pap in the title? Did you know what Koala Pap was before I just said it? Because before today, I did not know that there was a difference between koala poop and koala pap. Okay, so apparently people are going to plant my fingerprints on murder weapons to up my kill count. Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you put them on your own murder weapons, your own fingerprints, and then we could have a murder off. I am Goodard. Uh, he did just say that the DSM-4 did not have cannabis withdrawal listed. That is a thing. And in fact, there are new ICD-10 codes that came after this was printed. So this was like 2013 that they finalized this. And then since then, um, ICD-10 codes that are before the ICD-11 comes out, they came out for different types of withdrawal for cannabis. And so a lot of this is like cross reference with ICD-10 system so that you can do billing properly. And yeah, there are a lot of things that you can add to just the DSM-5 in the addiction category, even since it was written. And you can download them from the DSM-5 website. Uh, Popcorn Power wants to know why a drug-free island doesn't work for addicts. I know I'm not the only one who's thought of this. That is like a beautiful question because I've thought of this for years. So here we go. You just energized me, Popcorn Power. Here we go. So I was talking with someone who has a PhD in forensic psychology, and her name's Kristen, and she also has a degree in counseling and a license and all that. That's how I met her in addiction counseling. And I was uh, thinking about starting a new type of pre-treatment service for addiction. And my idea was that there are a lot of addiction treatments that last 60 to 90 days, right? And uh, they have horrible failure rates. Especially the one that we were looking at had a 2 week blackout period where people weren't allowed to leave. And then after that 2 weeks, they were allowed to go out and get a job during the day. And, they were allowed to go out on smoke breaks and whatnot. And basically, after the 2 week blackout period, immediately thereafter, that was where the biggest number of failures happened, where we would have a relapse that we could see in that client, you know, during their treatment. And so In most treatment facilities, they don't kick people out right away for a relapse because then they wouldn't have any clients. But after a certain number of relapses, they will kick people out of a program. So, uh, given that the blackout period was just 2 weeks long, I figured, well, maybe it would be good if the blackout period were, say, 2 months long, because 2 weeks was just not enough time for people's minds to get over the craving of the drug of choice that they had when they went in. So my my theory here is maybe there should be a company started, and in my mind I call it the dryer. It's a giant building. It's just a cube with no windows, kind of like Arkham Asylum, right? And in the dryer, you dry out, right? I haven't really worked on the acronym for it, but the D and the R is probably drug rehab, right? And so in the dryer, you're isolated from all drugs, right? Nothing comes in and out of there, in or out of there without being approved, right? It's a lockdown facility. It's basically a drug-free island, but it's not surrounded by water, but you can't get out. It's maximum security, right? So I was talking with Kristen about this, and she said, "No, it's not going to work." Right? I'm like, "What? You're not even wanting to hear me out, like give it a chance." And she's like, "No, if you don't have people experiencing the temptation in real time, it's just a fake timeout. People go to prison, and then the first day out they relapse. You know, and sometimes people in prison have a very hard time scoring. So even people who have gone even longer stints than that, against their will, without their drug of choice, when they get out, they relapse because they weren't dealing with the real time temptation. They weren't dealing with it in their environment. They weren't even in the environment that they're going to try to adapt to become part of society once again. So um, I can't tell you that the drug free island won't work completely, but I can tell you to the extent of what I've seen is that there just seems to be, as soon as you release people from total accountability by way of maximum security lockdown, um, a good number of them will just relapse. Like as soon as they get the opportunity, they will go out and score. I'm still mulling over whether or not I want to advocate for some system like the dryer in my mind. The closest analog I could tell you about to it would be the IRT program in Alamosa, Colorado, where people who are from all over the state, they get sent down there. This is a criminal justice program, by the way. You have to actually have a criminal record to get into it. You can't get into it without being on paper. Um, so that's like a 90-day program at least, and it's very locked down, and it does not have good uh, results. Um, well, it has better results than doing nothing, you know. But a similar program that is not run by the criminal justice system in Colorado is called Fort Lyon, right? And I've done a video on my channel of what Fort Lyon looks like. It looks like the academy where the X-Men grow up, right? It's out in the middle of nowhere. It used to be a mental health facility, used to be a state prison, used to be a VA hospital. right? It's got a long history. But Fort Lyon, basically, the driveway to it is a mile and a half long, right? It's a long walk. And if you were to leave the facility and start walking towards the nearest gas station that would have beer, which is 10 miles away from it, um, people would know what you were doing, you know? So Fort Lyon is used by the Coalition for the Homeless here in Colorado as kind of like a drug-free island retreat by sending people out into the middle of nowhere, right? And it's paid for by their Medicaid, so they get free meals. They just go out there and uh, treatment. I can't speak as to what kind of treatment they get while they're there. You know, I haven't seen the program on the inside, but I can tell you that people are allowed to go to it for up to 2 years. Just take a 2 year break from their life, and most people who opt for that are already homeless. So they're homeless and they're addicted and they're on the streets of Denver, and they get sent all the way down to Fort Lyon. And what happens when they take a break from Fort Lyon? Like, say they come back on this van because a family member passed away, or they got a pass to come back to Denver to get some stuff done, like their driver's license needed renewal or something. What happens when they come back? They relapse. And not all of the relapses are known by the uh, Fort Lyon agency, because a lot of the clients lie to them. They ended up in other facilities that I was a part of during that time when they were on their pastime. They were in emergency rooms, they were in detoxes, and it didn't take long for them to hit the street, score some alcohol, get really fucking drunk, and then they either did or did not do what they went to do on their pass. Maybe they went to their doctor's appointment. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they got their driver's license renewed. Maybe they didn't. But then if they missed the van going back to Fort Lyon, then they would maybe lose their bed at Fort Lyon. So, um, you know, some of them would just take that pass, relapse, and then abscond from the treatment program altogether. You know, but that's the closest analogs that I know of being a drug-free island. Let's see. Dragon Slayer says people just need to be motivated. Um, I am a fan of motivational interviewing, and it is something that all addiction counselors in Colorado are trained in. Um, it's basically dealing with ambiguity and how to talk to people in order to get them to open up about their problems, but really dealing with ambiguity and wanting to make a change in your life. So, yeah, motivation. I don't know if that's what you meant, but let's see. Bugsy says, no booze in the house, even for other people, and won't go to places where there's alcohol. That actually sounds like me. So I heard about this thing. It's Heineken 00, and uh, a lot of my clients tried it and said tastes just like Heineken. Not like O'Doul's, which they call piss water. Um, and they said that there's some Stella zero alcohol beer and some local IPA called Groovy that also has zero alcohol in it. And these are people who, if they're on probation, if they get urine tested, the metabolites for alcohol would be found uh, within 3 or 4 days of them drinking something. So they don't want any alcohol. And so they've tried this Heineken Zero Zero and they really like it. And so I was in Walmart and I saw it. And I remember, like, I was like, man, do I want to buy this? Am I curious enough to buy it? And I didn't. That's how teetotaler I am. It's like, I don't even want fake beer that tastes like real beer. Um, that's how not interested I am in alcohol. Let's see. Popcorn Power says, "What if you could never leave drug-free island?" Um, I don't know. I've been trying a pretty drug-free life myself. I do have prescriptions for things that are not psychoactive or normally thought to be psychoactive. Um, uh, I mean, my Synthroid, I guess you could consider it a little bit of a mood stimulator because without it, I would be kind of dead to the world. But as far as psychoactive drugs and alcohol, I'm living pretty free of all of that. And I don't need an island to do it. Um, you're like, what if you could never leave? I'm like, I don't want to leave, you know? And I'm not alone in that. I know plenty of people who have been sober for a very long time and drug free for a very long time who prefer to not be on drugs. Bugsy says he doesn't go anywhere, but when he volunteers around a lot of street folks, he sees it a lot. Yeah, and it's one of those things where I can't exactly put my finger on whether doing drugs makes you homeless or being homeless makes you want to do drugs to pass the time because that's what I'm leaning towards for just a generality for why you see it among homeless people so much. It's because nothing to lose, you know. Popcorn Power says my cankles are beautiful. I just made a 360-degree video the other day, and people were talking about um, all sorts of different aspects of my body. It's like, okay, you guys normally see me, from this up, um, and to see like the whole me, or you guys are like, oh my god, let me just judge every little aspect of you. You know, I'm in my 40s now. It's like it's all downhill from here. I'm going to try to preserve myself, you know, as long as I can. But yeah, breaking both my legs last year didn't really help. When I walk out in the parking lot from my car to the office, it kind of looks like I'm a big fat penguin. or maybe a really anxious, skittish Tyrannosaurus Rex. Popcorn Power says yes, but you're not an addict. Um, hmm. When people ask me if I'm an addict, in the capacity of like they know that I'm an addiction counselor, I usually do say no because I understand that they mean, have you ever been addicted to those hard drugs, or alcohol? But if we're going to say food, sugar, social media, internet, um, those things, I think you could make a really good case for me. Let's see what else. Carbonation, like even in the absence of caffeine. Wait, caffeine. Add the caffeine. Caffeine. But carbonation in the absence of sugar or caffeine, you know, it's one of those things like, what is the weirdest addiction I've come across? The reason why I'm taking so long to answer this is because of confidentiality. Because if it's the weirdest, then it's something where if I were to tell you the story, it pretty much would be narrowed down to one person. You know what I'm saying? So it's hard for me to tell you what the weirdest addiction I have seen has been, but um, it's going to take me a second to think of how to say this so that I wouldn't be actually saying anything about a particular person. Okay, so there was once a case that I came across where somebody, in order to get prescribed the drugs that they wanted, they hurt themselves and they got a particular type of drug, um, which is a belladonna suppository. It was an opiate in belladonna suppository. Um, and that was the preferred method of ingestion for this person. And right now, I hope that one of you is Googling belladonna and opiate suppository. So, you guys know that if you stick something up your bum, it absorbs in a different way, it hits in a different way. And so, um, if people complain to a doctor that that's the route that they need because of certain things, sometimes they need to come up with proof. And so that's the strangest thing that I've seen somebody want to be addicted to is the rectal route for a belladonna and opiate suppository. So Popcorn Power wants to know why we don't keep hardcore addicts who can't be rehabilitated on the drug-free island for life, so that they could have a full life but have incoming packages be strong, controlled. Um, it's because they're going to die anyway. Um, I think it comes down to the different perspectives that people take on uh, addiction. So if you have the moralistic viewpoint, you think that somebody is making a decision every time that they are using. And so it's a flaw of their character, right? And so why would we want to pay for somebody who is choosing to do this to themselves, right? So you get to the conservative idea of, people have the freedom to make decisions for themselves, and if they are costing themselves a lot, then that's their choice. And so this is the moralistic viewpoint. Um, the biopsychosocial model would look at addiction as a disease that robs you of your ability to make decisions. And so people who think of things in that way um, regarding addiction might uh, say, yeah, it might be a good thing to take away someone's autonomy and restrict their access to normal life by putting them on a drug free island. But then, you know, it wouldn't take much for me to paint such actions as fascism because you are taking away people's civil liberties because of a decision that you made about the uh, choices that they're making. So there are different ethical considerations in this, and I think people's autonomy is one of them. If somebody decides that they want to relapse, who are you to get in the way? If they decide that they want to eat themselves to death with cheeseburgers, do we lock people up for that? You know, it's killing more people. Smoking kills more people than all the other drugs put together. You know, Google it. Time for a fingernail trim. Totally not judging. Okay, I am. I'll go ahead and say it's really hard for me to trim this one. These right here, um, I find it easier to trim them, but like just my pointer fingers, I take stickers off of things and peel up stickers all the time for labels, especially to label urine samples. It's one of those freaky things about being an addiction counselor. You get to be a, a an expert on what is or is not a fake penis, and you also have to peel up labels and stick them on urine samples. I don't I don't know what happened to Dragon Slayer, but he said re-even. Like I think I broke his typing fingers or something. Um, so yeah, Bugsy says, "Are these addicts violent? If they're violent, it's called prison." Um, yeah, and that is outside of the scope of talking about an addiction. If somebody makes a separate decision to be violent, but sometimes there are drugs that, in and of themselves, would make you violent, like say alcohol. And Popcorn Power said, "What if permanent drug-free island was a one-time sign-up choice. Um, I could get with it, you know, as far as my own uh, morality. So I would also say that if we had a prison that was, say, not up to capacity, but we had homeless people that said, you know what, I'd just like to sign up for prison for a week. Why not let them just go in without having to um, commit a crime? You know, if we've got the capacity as you know, as a country with a whole bunch of homeless people, and we've got vacancy in a place that, like, yeah, nobody really wants to be there, but they don't want to be out in the cold and the snow right now. So if we had vacancy in the prisons, why not just say, hey, anybody want to go to prison? You know, it's an offering, but I think if you look at other models like, I guess, Oregon, the Portland model where they were just giving housing to people en masse, you'll see that, like, just regular housing works really well. You don't have to make it a prison with guards and crap. You can just give people a regular apartment, and all of a sudden, the hope that you instill in them that they could actually pull themselves up out of poverty just kind of motivates them in a very measurable way. It's not going to motivate all of them, but enough of them that you end up fixing a lot of lives. And maybe if you boil it down to numbers because you measure human worth in empirical terms like that, then you could see that it's at least worth it as far as the amount of money that you would otherwise be spending on people. Like, say, in the bills they run up in emergency services, in shelters, in prisons, and all of that stuff. Why not just, you know, give them a food stamp card with like $250 on it, and give them a free studio apartment with utilities paid and a bed. You know, that would cost in Denver. It would cost uh, to pay the utilities on a studio apartment and the going rate for a studio apartment. I would say you would be getting up towards $1,500 to $2,000 a month, all included, like food and electricity and you know running water, trash services, and all that to just pay for someone to live. $2,000 a month. And what do homeless people run up in a bill usually if they're addicted and using all of the city services? Well, I can tell you that if they go to a detox, it's $450 a day per calendar day. If they go to an emergency room, the minimum for the bill is in the thousands, you know, and that is dependent on a number of factors like did they use an ambulance to get there? You know, did somebody call an ambulance because somebody was drunk and fell over? Um, and there are people that are running up tabs in our city of $1 million in a year, just city services that don't need to be paid that way. Why wait for our city's emergency services to get taxed by all these people? Uh, taxed, get attacked by all these people instead of just giving them a free apartment to live in. It makes sense monetarily, even if you're like a conservative person who thinks we should not be giving free things out to people. It's going to unmotivate them. Just look at how much money we're spending on them right now. Take that money, put it in a giant apartment complex, and give the apartments away for free. You would do better with your money that way than allowing people to make multiple ER visits in a month, you know, because if they're homeless and drinking on the streets, they're going to cause some problems where cops get called and they get taken in to detox or the emergency room. And Popcorn Power says, I think the Russian Deadpool girl in Australia feels guilty because she thinks she introduced Russian Deadpool to shrooms. Uh, yeah, that's if you read the skeptic feminist Twitter account that she had access to, I think that uh, you could deduce that. That's what I read into what she has written. Um, and Dragon Slayer says in the UK, anyone can get a free place to live, but we still have homeless people. And that's one of those things where people are making the argument that we probably still should have some sanitariums and state-run mental facilities because care in the community is actually it's conservative speak for we don't care, kick them out, and don't uh, treat them at all. It's uh, it's not working for everyone. You know, I did just mention autonomy earlier in this video, and for a certain level of client, they were being stuck in state mental health facilities and having their civil rights violated in the past. And I am not talking about that client. I would hope that there would be some way for a client that was intelligent enough to realize that his civil rights were violated and he didn't like it, that he could get out of a mental health facility. But there are many homeless people who just cannot take care of themselves, and they do need to be taken care of in a facility like we had in our country in the 1950s, and we kind of got rid of when we had care in the community come about because of certain wonder drugs. Cockroach Afro, I salute you for being a team leader in a group home for disabilities in Australia. That is a very selfless profession. Bugsy says, "I know people that actually choose the streets." Um, that is true. There are people that not only choose the streets, they choose to hitch rides on trains to go from city to city. They you know they do the hitchhiking if they can, but they'll also hitch ride on trains. And there are encampments here in Denver right now, even though there are inches of snow on the ground. Um, Around the Platte River, you will find whole encampments of people who would rather stay in tents than go into a city shelter or go to a church that runs a little side shelter. They would rather stay out there in a little shanty town. Um, I haven't made many videos about those areas because of one instance that I had where I was trying to film a very particular thing, and I wasn't trying to film homeless people. What I was trying to film was the way that homeless people were being treated by the police around a certain area in Five Points in Denver, where basically police were taking away uh, blankets, and it was a big news story at the time. And uh, they were also cleaning up people from right outside of the Jesus Saves Denver Rescue Mission building and the Catholic Charities building that's catty corner to it. And basically, this is where homeless people would congregate because they felt safe, even if they didn't get into the shelter for the night. They felt safe sleeping right outside of it. And the police were picking people up from there and like ticketing them for having a tent or whatnot. And I was trying to film the police aspect of it, like the brutal aspect of it. And I had some homeless people come up to me saying like, "We're not your fucking props," and I realized that they thought that I was doing something completely different because I wasn't even trying to film them, but uh, I was trying to film the cops in full hazmat gear deconning the sidewalk as if it couldn't be done with just a pressure washer and maybe hire one of the homeless people themselves and pay them, even minimum wage. It took somebody in an entire hazmat suit to run a pressure washer. And so, um, yeah. And these are sidewalks that everyone just walks up and down, normally. Yeah, yeah, I know that people have peed in certain parts of them and whatnot, but if you weren't told that someone had peed on that sidewalk the day before, you wouldn't know. And you've probably been walking all over the place on sidewalks where not just people, but birds and dogs and all sorts of things have just pissed everywhere. And when it comes to homeless people, the police treat it as if it's like this huge hazmat concern, when really it's just you know taking things way way out of proportion. So um, I wanted to film that, and when I got accosted by these people who thought that I was trying to film homeless people without their permission, I realized that it's such a horrible thing to do to people to film them without their permission while they're in that state, that I'm careful about it. Not it does that doesn't mean that I don't catch it from time to time throughout the city, but I don't go looking to focus my camera right on some people who are being homeless and in public because maybe they chose to be that way, maybe they didn't, but they aren't choosing to be memorialized on my YouTube channel, you know, as a homeless person. Yeah, Bugsy, a lot of people don't want to take their picture. They don't want their picture taken at all. Like my girlfriend, who is very, uh, let me be behind the camera, not in front of it. There are images of Misty on my channel if you dig really, really hard, but there are times where if I were to just turn my camera at her, um, I'm pretty sure my face would turn the other way as her fist would just be trying to knock me out. My sister Deb was the same way before she died. It was very hard on us to find pictures of her from certain years of her life because she gained some weight and didn't look like she did when she was in high school, so she didn't like taking pictures. Even though a lot of people thought she was cute, you know, one of the prettier people in my family, um, there was a big part of her life that was not in images because uh, she was sensitive about her weight. Now, me, you guys are going to have like plenty of footage of me when I die of all different shapes and sizes and colors of hair and styles of beard. And, you know, look at me through the ages and you'll have so many different types of me. Let's see. So Cockroach Afro says, I've literally seen one homeless person in Australia. And Dragon Slayer says, the spiders take care of the homeless in Australia. Everything's poisonous in Australia, you know? Everything's out to get you, you know? I think that's why they don't have as bad of a evangelical Christian problem in Australia. It's because us Americans, we have evangelicals who think that the entire world was created for human beings, mankind. You know, it's a very man centric perspective. But if you're living in Australia and every other goddamn thing you see is poisonous and out to get you and kill you, you get this perspective of, wow, maybe maybe the world doesn't revolve around us. Popcorn Power wants to know now, how about free range homeless island? We need to care for them somehow, food kitchens, apartments if they wish, psychological and life improvement care if they wish, or they can tent it if they wish. Okay. Um, One of the things I wanted to do with my channel, as far as a project, is a video essay on how to make it with 3 square meals a day, 7 days a week in Denver, uh, just using uh, free food. You know, soup kitchens, um, food pantries. You know, it's possible. In fact, I have an old guide to it that would give you 3 square meals a day. Now they're not all in the same place because not all these places are open on every day, right? So you have to know which place is open on which day. Um, as far as breakfasts go, I can tell you that the number one rated breakfast among homeless people in Denver is Volunteers of America, and that is north of California Street, I think, um, more on the north side of downtown. And the number two rated breakfast for free for homeless people would be Father Woody's. Father Woody's Haven of Hope. And that is on 7th and Lipan. You would go down Spear to about 8th Avenue and then head west and follow all the other homeless people that are going to Father Woody's to eat. Um, Storm Singer, you're welcome. Thanks for participating in my sleep study. I hope you have very good dreams. Cockroach Afro is saying that there's dangerous waterways and beaches because of crocodiles in Australia. Dude, I've seen documentaries. The snails in the water will kill you. The fucking sea snails. Everything in Australia is dangerous. Okay, now Popcorn Bear says, "Well, this is his final solution: import more poisonous spiders to the U.S." Okay, well, guys, I've given you an hour of my time once again, and it's been good. I will try to stop by a little bit earlier tomorrow night and see if I can't get this done a little bit earlier, but I'm going to continue trying to put up a video a day because it's one of those signs of mental health for a YouTuber. Believe it or not, it's like you know, it's like putting on your clothes without putting them on backwards. If you see somebody doing their routine every day instead of not doing it. So yeah, I'm going to keep doing it for what it's worth. You guys can keep checking on my mental health that way. Laters.